Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining the second ParaPlan webinar. We're going to kind of wait a couple minutes, let kind of everybody join in. And this is Kyle Archer, and I've got Brett Kale with me as well. And during the webinar, we're going to go ahead and mute all the participants, but you can chat with us if you have a question or comment. So I'm going to go ahead and
can everyone type into the chat, yes, you can hear us or something, so we can make sure everyone's on board with us? Great. All right.
Okay, let's go ahead and get going. Like I said, this is Kyle Archer. Got Brett with me, and we're scheduled to kind of do this webinar for an hour. Thank you guys for being ParaPlan users. And Brett and I are going to plan to host a webinar like this every other month. We might move it to Wednesdays, and we'll keep you posted via email. And so stay tuned for that. And we definitely welcome ideas from you guys on what a topic would be for the future. So we welcome that as well. And like Brett said, you know, we can't hear you, but please, if you have a comment or question during the webinar today, go ahead and use the chat window in the Zoom app. And today, Brett's going to be talking about odometer reconciliation and how to use ParaPlan reports to address those issues and get those looking good. And after that, he's going to do a deep dive into several reports that include the Fleet Manager Odometers Report, which is a comprehensive report of all the odometer entries, either manually input or from the iPad/iPhone ParaPlan app. We're going to talk about the actual data entry checks report, client report, the simple trip list, trip counts, FTA, NTD, on-time performance, and billing by program mileage. And thanks everybody for joining us. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Brett for kind of a reports overview. And here you go.
All right. Well, I know when we sent this out, it first said we were mostly going to be going over odometer reconciliation and things like that. As I was getting ready, I realized, you know, I think I assumed that everyone knows kind of the basic reports and how to export to Excel, things like that. And I thought I'd actually start there just to, you know, go over some of the basics, make sure everybody, you know, knows what's available. There's tons of reports. So weeding through them sometimes to find what you're looking for can be a bit overwhelming. So there's a few that I use for most everything, and then a lot of these are custom reports or people have needed to have certain data in a certain format. So, you know, I've worked with all of you. I think, you know, I'm always like, if the data's in there, we can get it out, but that list keeps building, and so sometimes it's trying to find what you're looking for can be a task. So I thought I would just start with there's kind of three basic, just give me a list of data reports. We have the client report, the trip count by client, and the simple trip list. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the client report. And basically, you know, to get real basic, you go to reports. When it first comes up, this is, one sec, Honor, yes, you are. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure Honor can hear us before we get going. Okay, and wow, I'm not good at two things at once. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring this up and wait and. Get my phone muted. Sorry about that. Well, I'm going to go ahead and keep going, and hopefully Honor will be, all right, cool, great. All right, so I'm going to start with the client report, and this is, just your basic, give me a list of all the clients in my database that meet certain criteria. And there's a ton of filters on these 3 list reports I'm going to talk about first. One, like a common one, when we're first importing clients or you're putting them in, you want to make sure everything's geocoded. Obviously we can't do routing. We're going to be doing trips from their home address often. So, making sure everyone's geocoded would be a pretty common filter. So I'm going to change that to yes. And then, there's the option to view as PDF and view in Excel on a lot of the list reports. I prefer the view in Excel just because, one, I can fit a lot more data on there. You're limited by the screen size when you're doing a PDF. And also I can manipulate the data afterward. And just to recap what geocode means, that just means we go and ask Google Maps for a latitude and longitude, and they give us one. That allows us to do mapping, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and view this as a PDF first. And, this just gives me, this is some example data, and we, obviously couldn't use clients' real names, so some of them just say client on them, but pretend this is your client list. This just gives us, the pertinent things, what status they are, their phone number, their address. Now, if I go to Excel, obviously I can fit as many columns in there as I want. So I'm going to do an Excel export. And just some general things, I kind of assume people know this stuff too, but when I first open these, they just kind of come up with fixed width columns. If you click in the very corner, that'll highlight everything. And then you can kind of double click between the A and B, and that resizes everything based on your data. So that makes things quickly readable. And then how to do sorts. An example, this report's good for cleaning data. Like I could, want to see, like I just talked about, geocoding. Maybe I'm concerned with my birthdays. So you can sort in Excel by going to data and then click on this sort. And sort just means I'm going to put it in a certain order. And let me do birthday. And these have a lot of dummy birthdays, but if I was using real birthdays, I could see, okay, are these valid, or are they pretty high? Or I can go the other way, newest to oldest. And if I scroll back, hey, I probably didn't get these people's birthdays correct. Maybe I put 2018 instead of the right year. So this, allows me to periodically go through my data. If I want a default program on everyone, then I could sort by that and make sure everyone has one. Different things like that. So this is, if someone, say you want to do a mailing list to everybody in your database, the client report is just a list of, the clients and a number of different fields about them. And if there's something on here you need that I don't have, you can just let me know and I can add that easily. So that's the client report. So again, I got to that by doing view in Excel instead of view as PDF. So, all right. So the next one I'm going to show is the simple trip list. This is kind of your basic, you're going to get a lot of questions. Show me all my trips that went to this city. Show me all my trips for this particular program. this is just your basic export of those trips. So I'm going to, we have some dummy data in here, and trust me, I'm going to mistype these dates at some point. But so here I can, basically, I just want to see all my executed trips from the 3rd to the 13th. And I'm going to view them in Excel. And by default, this has about every field in the trip table. So, it's huge. But any kind of data you need, you can go find. It's most likely going to be on here. What I've done with a lot of you, and anyone who wants me to do this can just email me after this or give me a call. I can customize what fields come out when you click that button. So if it's not customized, you're going to get this, great big one with all these different fields. And maybe you only want certain ones. I can customize it so when you're in here and you hit view in Excel, your list comes up. And what I often have people do is just delete the columns you don't want, put them in the order you want. If you want something not on here, kind of make a column for it and email it to me, and I can make it come up differently when you click on it. So I'm going to show you, like, here's what another client has me do. They don't need all that extra information. The most important thing to them is a driver. They need the vehicle information. Some of these, this is something custom I did for them, I'm sure, that means something based on their data. So any of these, I can basically do anything in these reports that you need if you just let me know. Here's another example. They just want a real simple, the pickup time, name, address, phone number, number of passengers, are they handicapped, is it a subscription, and some notes. So yeah, this is kind of the main just dump of trip data report. And again, if you want that in a certain format, just let me know, and I think I know all of you well, and I can get you whatever reports you need. Excuse me. Okay, next I'm going to go over kind of the third question a lot of people get is, show me all the clients that rode, say, during a time period. So I want everyone who rode last month, or in my case, I'm going to do our demo data. Yeah, I typed it right.
Yep.
See if I can do it twice. Here we go. Okay, so basically what I'm asking here is, show me all my clients that rode during this time period. And maybe I want to do mailing labels, but I don't want to, I've used the software for years. I only want to do the people who rode in the last year or things like that. I can run this, and it's basically going to give me that same client data, but it, narrows it down to those clients. And if you need a count of how many times they rode during that time period, it also has a trip count. So this can be useful for a number of things. Mailing labels, a lot of times, how many times did different clients ride, things like that. So those are kind of my three. You can answer most questions you're going to get asked with those three reports. Let's see. And those were the client report, gives you a list of all the clients in the database. The trip count by client will give you the client data for people who rode during a time period. And then the simple trip list is just kind of a dump of the trip data that meets all different kinds of, different filters that I have, etc. All right, does anyone have any questions so far? Try not to jump around, but I'm used to training more one-on-one, so talking to myself is a little odd, but let's see. Okay, and then just a couple other reports. list reports. If you want a list of subscriptions, there's a subscription report. You know, it'll give me all my valid subscriptions and what, you know, what their intervals are, etc. There's, in the list reports, we have the FTA activity report. Which I'll show here. Al's giving me the thumbs up for getting my dates right. So I think a lot of people have to report to the FTA. This is the FTA activity report. If you get FTA funding. And Kyle wanted me to explain what list reports are, you know, kind of give me a list of trips, give me a list of clients, things like that. Summary reports are where we're going to kind of group them together and classify them, things like that, so that you don't have to go through the simple trip list and count how many were a certain program. We can kind of give you the counts, etc. Just a couple, the on-time performance is kind of a cool one in here. And this just kind of, you set windows on those parameters. I'm saying plus or minus 15 is kind of my window here. So if we go back here, it goes by driver, and you know, he did 20 trips during that time period. 5 were before the pickup time, or more than 15 minutes before the pickup time. We consider on time to be, you know, 15 minutes to the actual pickup time. Late within the window would be, you know, the pickup time plus 15, somewhere in there. And then late out of the windows if you're more than 15 minutes late. So.
Oh, just that Claire did have one late outside the window.
Yeah, like, so really this is kind of the number you're typically looking at. And then we have the summary at the bottom. Those are the truly late ones. So that's just a neat report. There's, like I said, there's so many in here. If you're looking for something and you can't find it, just call or email me and I can put you in the right direction. Or if we don't have something, that's how those big filter lists get built, is I can just add a filter typically to a report to get to what you need.
And one thing that I've seen our customers do is with that on-time performance report, they can kind of go in and actually give awards to drivers for best on-time performance. Is something that I've seen done, so that's a nice way to get that accomplished.
Oh, and another one I didn't even have on my list, but now that I see this non-executed trips, you know, this can be used to monitor people who are canceling a lot or no showing. In our system, we have different classifications. A cancel would be something they do ahead of time. A no-show or no-go would be something you go to the client's address and they're not there or they don't come out. We consider a trip executed if it's on a route and not canceled or no-showed. And then if it's unscheduled, we consider that not executed. So when you're doing reporting, a lot of them by default do what we call executed. And then you can, typically there's like a no-go or canceled filter on there that you can change. So in this case, it's going to show me all my cancels and no-goes. Some people have policies like if you cancel within an hour, even though we didn't go there, we're still going to charge you, different things like that. A lot of times, well, what people typically do is come into their cancel reasons, and you can set one up, canceled less than an hour. And then you can filter for those. And most of my billing reports also have bill this cancel code as if it's a no-go, basically, if you charge for those. One second. Responding to a chat there. One sec. So yeah, here's a cancel report. You can actually get this same thing from the simple trip list by changing the filters, show executed to false, show no-go to true, show canceled to true. So there's that simple trip list is very versatile, but this one's just kind of set up to specialize in that. So, okay. So that's just kind of some general, some of my favorites. Next, I was going to go over billing, and, everyone does billing differently. So I'm not going to get into specific calculations, but most of you who do billing, I've worked with, and often it's different by program, et cetera. And I can calculate the cost, based on whatever, and put that into your report. So if I haven't done that with you and that's something you want, let me know. And we can get that set up. So, basically I can make a property that if it's this program, it's this much. If it's this program, it's that much. And a lot of you have more advanced calculations, like it's this much for the pickup, and that's good for the first 5 miles. Then it's a mileage after that. I can calculate all that. Or any special, like if you do logistic care, they have little buckets, 0 to 3 miles is this much, etc. So wheelchair, there's all kinds of different things, and I can calculate all that if you just give me the specifics. So kind of before we get to billing, to do billing, a lot of times we need our odometer readings to be correct. And if you're hand entering those, I don't care how good you are, you're going to mistype an odometer here and there. If you're doing mobile, especially when you're starting out, you'll see drivers sometimes forget to swipe the pickup. So they'll get to the drop off and they'll, I forgot to do that, and just swipe them both at once, giving you basically odometer of 0 for that trip. So here I have a number of reports that kind of can help point those out. I'm going to start with the Fleet Manager odometers. And a lot of our public clients or people who get public funding have to report deadhead and revenue miles, things like that. And for those calculations, your numbers have to be pretty good, because it's using the route start, the route end, the first pickup, the last drop off. And if you have an odometer off, that can, one extra 0 can be hundreds of thousands of miles on there. So yeah, by default, the parameters for this are the start and the end date. You can do it for a certain route if you want. A lot of times you might want to remove a route, and you can do that by putting minus in there. Like if you have some people use an extra route for trips they outsource to, or you might be doing a fixed route with a certain route that you want to leave out of your, this kind of report. You can do that there. For example, if I didn't want route 1, I could do something like that. I don't know if there's a route 1 in here, but
there's a run 1.
Okay, so I could do minus run 1. Vehicles to exclude, you could, kind of similar to the route, you could say, I want this for everyone, but I don't want vehicle 3A. Maybe I only get state funding for half my vehicles. I can leave out the ones I don't want, or vice versa. I can specify which ones I do want. This can be grouped a couple ways. I like it by vehicle because that's, then all those odometers are for the same vehicle and it's going to line up. This was something, if you need this for certain reports broken down by weekdays, weekends, Saturday, Sunday, you can set filters for those. And then if for some reason you would only need odometer readings for a certain program, you can do that. So I'm gonna go ahead and run this. And I've purposely, when I built this report, I wanted it to show data errors. So, a lot of things I could catch that, hey, that's a bad piece of data and leave it out. And I purposely did not do this in this report so that you'll get big numbers or negatives, and that'll point out to you that there's an error there and you can go correct it. So I purposely put a few errors in here. And the first one, if I just start looking down total miles, well, okay, I'm going to talk about this first. So basically we have the vehicle, and then that vehicle could be assigned to a different route each day. And one line, this represents run 2 on January 3rd. This is going to be the starting odometer of the route, the first pickup odometer of the first trip on there, the last drop-off odometer, and the ending odometer of the route. So total miles would then be basically your service miles. It would be from your ending odometer minus your starting odometer of the route for that day. Revenue miles are from the first pickup to the last drop-off. So it's basically the difference of these middle two. And then deadhead miles are defined as from the starting odometer to the first pickup, and then the last drop-off back to the ending odometer. And then these are similar on the times. We also, I have another report, shared ride stats, that does this with loaded miles versus unloaded, which not a lot of people have to report that, but I find that real useful information for ride sharing and stuff. If I'm driving around with a lot of unloaded miles, it would include between trips as well. So if you have a lot of unloaded miles, that means you're either driving a long way to the first pickup, or you're having large gaps where you're driving from pickup to drop off. So, the lower that number, the better my routing is. So that's the shared ride stats, but it's very similar to this. It just does loaded and unloaded versus revenue and deadhead. And then I got a question, why negatives show up. And again, I'm not sure if I have any in here, but I purposely left error reporting out of here, or error corrections out of here. So say you had a ending odometer that was less than the starting odometer, it would show you a negative. That way you would know, hey, I need to go look at this. Similarly, to calculate the total miles for the month, I take the lowest odometer, the lowest starting odometer, and the highest ending odometer. And what that does is if you have the data for a wrong vehicle on here, which I do in this example, it's going to throw a big number because it's using the wrong, either a low starting odometer or a high ending odometer. So here, I purposely, basically this is data from a different vehicle that just got assigned wrong in the scheduling canvas, in the actuals. So you can kind of see I'm taking the lowest odometer, and then the highest matches the right vehicle. So you end up with this huge number here, and you know something's off. So I can further investigate, look through here, and I see, hey, these 37s don't belong with the 106s. So then I can look, okay, this is a sign, this is on the 9th on run 4, and look through here and see, oh, okay, so actually vehicle 384 has some numbers that obviously fits to. So if I look on the 9th, 37, 789, yeah, that's actually supposed to be on this one. So what I then do is go to the scheduling canvas. For that day. And it's reading all this data from your actuals view. So then I can go find this vehicle and change it to the correct one, which was 384. So then when I run the report again, that is then corrected and I get a more reasonable total miles. So it's purposely going to throw these big crazy numbers at you so that you see those and they could potentially be negative. It's just doing the straight math without corrections. So like I said, if say you had a starting odometer that was greater than the ending odometer, you would see a negative number there. What the?
So like revenue miles, is that some?
And then revenue miles is just the sum of these, and deadhead miles are just the sum of these, because you have to calculate those on a route to route basis. But this number is, rather than adding these up, the 420, instead of just adding these, it's taking that lowest and the greatest. So hopefully that makes sense. So then I put a couple of other errors in here. So I can kind of scroll through here and I see, oh, okay, here's a big number. I probably don't have close to 7,000 miles in revenue miles. And I see an NA, which means I couldn't calculate it. So if I look here, it is using on this route, it's also not error correcting. So it's looking for the lowest pickup odometer. And if I forget to put a pickup odometer, it's going to be 0. So that will stand out to me. Again, this is on 1.9 on vehicle 477. So if I come back to actuals, let's see, it's this one. And I can see, hey, I'm missing an odometer reading there. So if I go ahead and put that back in and then rerun my report, now I get the right information here and my calculations are corrected. And my NA is gone. So now I'm going to scroll down, and here's another one you see sometimes is I forgot to put my starting odometer for the route. So again, I'm going to get an NA on that because I can't calculate it. And I can correct that by going and finding that vehicle and correcting the odometer reading. So basically, if you run this regularly and look for errors and correct them, by the time you get this corrected, your data is going to be very good for reporting because it's kind of looked for a lot of different things. At the route level, things that don't make sense, say you put the your trips have the odometers for one vehicle, and sometimes I'll see the route odometers don't match. This would show that. You see the zeros and go correct those. You see the vehicles that are on, the odometers are on the wrong vehicle, you correct those. So by the time you get done with this, you should get reasonable numbers down here and be able to have confidence that the rest of your reports are pretty good or are good. So then it does the same thing with the times. Times typically people don't report on as much, but if you do, you can kind of go through the same process here. And it's kind of the same deal. It's, say you had your last drop off time is greater, say it's 4 o'clock, but the route ends at 3 o'clock, that's going to throw off your numbers and give you a negative here. So yeah, let me see if I make this 6 p.m. Vehicle 384. And now I see that negative because it's, 4 o'clock minus 6 o'clock is negative 2 hours, and then it was half an hour on this side gives you a negative hour and a half of deadhead. So that would be another reason you would see a negative. So that report is great at showing errors in basically routes relating to each other different days. If you're looking at one scheduling day, you're not seeing how those odometer readings relate to that same vehicle throughout the month. So this report points that out. I have another report called the actual data entry checks. And this can be run, a lot of people will rectify the actuals the day after. So you get everything scheduled, you go perform it today. Tomorrow I go look at the data from today and check my actuals. So this report, especially if you're I developed this when people hand entered all this. It just looks for odd things in your data. And actually, it's better to run it on one day. So ultimately, you want this to be empty. Let me zoom in. Okay. And it's kind of, now that I look at this, I could probably clean this up some, but basically you're looking for things in red, and then you can look up here and see what's wrong. So if I see, here's a negative number in my route start to route pickup. Well, first, this top line has to do with odometer readings, and the bottom line has to do with the times. And since we corrected all the odometer readings when we were doing the other report, now we're seeing issues with the times. So in this case, it's just flagging the route start to the first pickup. Well, obviously, if my route starts at 7, I can't pick someone up at 6:59. So I would go into my actuals and correct that time. Or most likely, you just started earlier that day, so you would adjust your route start. Kind of like that is, here's the drop to route end. This is pointing out 4:15 drop off when your route ends at 4. So you can correct that by, most likely your route ended later, so you would adjust that. So this can be run, it looks for things like if your miles per hour are, 500 miles an hour, we know one of the numbers is off. It just looks for different things that I saw often as errors in data entry. Right. Yes, and this is showing each trip. So this is run 1 on 19, And then this is a specific trip that on this particular trip, its pickup was less than the route start. So this report, if you run this and you run the fleet manager odometers and you don't see any errors, your data is pretty perfect. So I know catching odometer readings is a big deal to a lot of people. Does anyone have any questions on any of that? Use the chat window if you have any questions. Okay. All right. So on to kind of more billing things. So like I said, that's the first part, is getting your odometers corrected. This report would flag a lot of, high mileage odometers, etc. But you can also, before I do billing, a lot of times what you want to do is just run this report. This is the billing by program mileage. And this, usually if we're working on billing together, this is the one I will customize and export for you. This is where I would put your calculations, etc. Sometimes I use the billing by program build, but this one is often where people will get their exports for billing, etc. So I'm just going to run this. Yeah, by default, it uses billable miles, which really more people, typically everyone bills by billable miles. A few people do by actual miles. But if you're doing actual miles, you're actually penalizing people for when you ride share, because they'll be on the vehicle a few extra miles to go pick someone else up. So typically programs let you or have you do billable miles, and basically that is, let me open today. By default, that's going to be what we calculate from Google. When we go ask Google, what's the distance from here to here, it's going to tell us 6 miles. So this mileage is the Google mileage, and you cannot modify this. So then if I look here in this pop-out, I guess I should talk about this real quick. So we have a number of billing fields, and you can see them all if I pop this out by clicking on the ... When we say client copay, that means we're going to collect it up front or collect it at the time of the ride. And anything you put on client copay is going to show up on mobile as something for the driver to, collect. And then they can swipe and say they've collected it, and that's going to fill in this collected type. So if you're doing mobile and having people collect fares, this copay and this copay collected are going to be the two that have to do with that. Kyle made me some screenshots here. I'm going to go down to 7 and show that. One more. Okay, so if I put something in this copay collected, then when you go to mobile, it'll show up on the manifest kind of on the right edge. Let me see if we have a screenshot of that. If I go up a couple, okay, you can see right there, like here on the right side, it's showing that I have a $250 copay to collect from Steve when I pick him up. So then when he goes there, he can go to the trip details and select the type of payment and how much they paid. If you tap on it, it'll just fill in the defaults, but you do have the ability to then go in here and say, they couldn't pay the full amount. Some people will still let them ride, so what you did collect, etc. So that's how the copay works. Then,
And we just got a question about, are those slides available? And we can make those either available on the website, or we can email those to you directly as a part of the response to this webinar. So that was a question we had. So we can get those to you, no problem. Hey, Kevin.
okay. Okay, bill to client would be, you're going to send the client a bill for their trips after the fact. So basically, if they are private pay or they pay for their own trips, but they don't pay up front, you're going to send them a bill. You would put that in bill to client. Bill to program would be where you're going to bill a certain program or contract for a number of different clients writing under that program for the month or a week or however you bill it. So, say a nursing home's paying you to transport their clients, all the different clients, you would select the nursing home's program and bill the program. You would then send them a bill of all the trips that wrote under that program. So typically, most of your billing will be bill to program. That we do with reporting. The other ones are, if you're dealing with the client, it's typically more straightforward.
Can they change the billable miles?
Okay, and back to what I was actually showing. So billable miles, by default, is going to be the same as the Google miles. But sometimes a program may specify what you can bill for that trip. So, some of the Medicaid brokers like Logisticare may say, we're only going to pay you for 5 miles for this trip. Then you can change that to 5. So on your reports, when you run it, that billing by program mileage, it would calculate it as a 5-mile trip. Or, it may take you extra to get somewhere. You can adjust that to be, say Google has the wrong mileage. You could correct it right there. Ideally, you would go back and correct your geocodes, but you can basically override the Google miles right there for billing purposes. So I kind of got off track, but so that's what billable versus actual is. Program, you're pretty much always going to do this for certain programs because you're only going to bill them for their trips. Some people charge for no-shows. Some people charge a half rate or something for no-shows. And that's something, if I work with you on your billing, I can, have it calculate all that. I can tell it's a no-show. I know what program it was. I can calculate the rate and say you bill for half of it on a no-show. I can do that calculation for you. So, and then you have, certain clients you maybe only want to bill, etc. If I write a couple custom reports for you, then or different exports, that's what this custom code is. I'll tell you what to type there to get the different formats. But so basically, we're going to view in Excel. And the first thing I typically do on these is go to, if I'm checking my actuals, this can be very useful by sorting by the actual miles. So let me see here. If I sort by that, like here, I can see, and the billable miles are typically what Google said. I can see, hey, I only put a mile on this trip when Google says it's 7 miles. Maybe I need to look at this. And perhaps that's one where the driver forgot to swipe or swiped at the last minute. So by sorting and comparing to billable, that can also point out things in my individual trip mileages. So here's a few I think I put in there on purpose. If we look, these are all listed as 6. their trips. Well, these two were actually should be longer. So you can go verify, is Google wrong, or am I misgeocoded, or did my driver, or if I'm entering them by hand, did I type the wrong number? So again, another way to check data. But yeah, basically this report, I, very similar to the simple trip list, typically work with people and figure out exactly what you need to send. And sometimes it varies by program. And then I can plug your calculations in there and come up with, what your total cost is, or sometimes there's 2 or 3 costs. We can work together to get that. So if anyone isn't doing billing in here, but has the data to do billing and needs to, get with me and we'll, work together and get all that figured out. So let's see. Look on my sheet here. Does anyone have any questions? Everyone does billing so differently. It would hard to get to real specifics of how each program's done, etc. But I want you to know kind of the basics of it, how to check your odometer readings, and that you can work with me to do billing if you're not currently. So any questions on that? I feel like I'm talking to myself.
I'm here.
Okay. All right.
Great.
Jody doesn't want to do billing, so hey, point taken. All right.
Yeah, about 8 minutes left.
Oh, time's flying. I didn't know if I could fill up the time. Now I'm not even getting through everything I wanted to. Okay, just some real quick summary reports. These don't necessarily have to do with billing, but they could if you just do flat fee billing. I'm going to go to summary now, and these are more like trip counts and things like that. The program report I like, and this is going to break it down. By program, and it gives me these certain counts. And I'm going to go over, we have a lot of different reports that give you this breakdown. And what these mean are these 3 classifications are elderly, and then these 3 are non-elderly. Ambulatory means they're ambulatory and they don't have a disability. This column means they're ambulatory, but they are marked as having a disability. And then wheelchair would be, obviously, they have a disability and they're in a wheelchair. Same for these. So then total, this is your trip count. So if you added all these up, because these have to do with the client of the trip, you would get 64. So if I have a trip record in there for Joe and he doesn't have any extra riders, or even if he does, he's only 1 in the total. There's 1 trip in there. The riders column would then include any of those, personal care attendants, if you let them transport kids, like here is an example where, or even here in Title III, there was 187 trip records, but then throughout those there were 8 extra riders somewhere in that data. So for billing purposes to, public funding, I would use riders because you get paid more, right? And then clients, you'll get a lot of people have to report on, they're called unduplicated clients, unique clients, and that's just basically every individual person. So if that took at least 1 ride. So if Joe takes 20 trips, he would be 20 in here in the total, but he'd only be 1 in the client count. So that's unique clients. These miles and hours are, to me, not the best metric, but they're passenger miles and passenger hours. And basically what that is if you just added up all the trip distances. And what it uses here is if there's actuals on the record, it'll use that. If there's not, it will use the Google mileages to calculate that. Okay, so like if you run the appointment type one, it will be kind of the same thing. I just want to real quick before I run out of time, we just built this NTD report, which a lot of people have to do.
And this is the standard S10 NTD report.
Yeah, so basically you can run that. It's gonna, if you obviously want to go through and reconcile all your odometer stuff first, but then this will calculate that, do it with the averages for the weekends, et cetera, that it needs. Yeah, basically do that report for you.
That's under summary NTD.
So, yes, summary reports, NTD, service non-rail S10. There was a couple more. You might look at the statistical report, the daily trip count by clients, pretty cool. We're about out of time. I do want to show, I've recently developed a couple what we call casts. I'll show this, then we'll wrap up. So you go to, these are basically, it's going to export to a web browser, and then it updates as data changes. So it's kind of a automatically refreshing report. So for this one, I'm going to, so I clicked on external display, and there's a couple of these. And if you have any ideas for these that would be useful, let me know. And if I click launch, this one, it's really meant to cast onto a big screen. So this one's pretty tight to see. But what it shows me are the trips. This is by driver. So if the driver is assigned to more than one route, all their trips would be on here. So it's kind of like mobile works. And then it'll be a list of the trips that they have not executed yet. And if it passes the pickup time, it turns red. So this day isn't really live, but they're, at 105, at 106, this one would turn red. And then you have your unassigned trips over here. As I move them, like say I take this one and move it up here, if I watch this, it's going to auto refresh. And it'll disappear from this unassigned.
And then drop on.
And then go on to the right route.
And these casts are meant to maybe put on a large screen in the dispatch room, if that's available, or just on a side monitor.
And it refreshes at the rate you have right there. So there, it finally went. So if you set that rate real low, it's going to hit the database a whole lot. So, if it refreshes about every 30 seconds or minute, kind of what you need to see. Another thing this does is as they perform trips, they change colors. So if I come to here, let me do it here. Let's see. If I pretend I picked this person up, come back here. Candace has a question. Is it a tablet adjustment or software when it comes to daylight savings time? So your iPad should automatically adjust for daylight savings time, just like, I don't know if you have an iPhone, it just that day it'll change the time, and then that's the time we're using for actuals. So it will adjust itself based on that. And now I can see that this changed colors because I picked them up. So now I'm going to go drop them off. And then as far as dispatching, at that point, I don't really care about them. So they're just going to disappear off of here. So this is really useful for people who, we have a few clients that just kind of schedule in the morning and then do everything on the fly from there. You get your list of trips here, and as drivers free up, you see an empty box and you know they're sitting there ready for a trip. I think I've gone over. I was going to show one more. In those caches, you might play with that other one too. It's the scheduling availability. It kind of gives you a chart of, I'll just launch it and then I'll let Kyle wrap us up, that adjusts as you put people on here. So you can kind of look at slots that might be open to schedule other people. So again, this is helpful while scheduling. So
great. And we can go over these casts next time as well. So thanks everybody. I think the webinar went great, and appreciate the questions. And we will send an email with a video recap of this. Plus, Kevin, I can send out to you and everyone else the iPad screenshots that you guys can use with training. And thanks again. And please send us any more topics for further webinars. Thanks again, guys.
All right. Have a good one.